Hello, YouTube. My name is Alan, and it's a time once again. Let's talk metal. Tonight we're going to talk about a fantastic new wave of British heavy metal band, one that I got into pretty early when I discovered new wave of British heavy metal in the early to mid 90s. They didn't have a whole lot of output back in the day, but there are a lot of little releases here and there that actually makes their catalog a little bit confusing. So we'll spend a little time tonight talking about and trying to unravel this knot that is the band Desolation Angels. All right, so some things right off the bat with Desolation Angels. First off, that is a badass name for a band. It's like Desolation Angels. At least it's badass until you realize that it's taken from the name of a Bad Company album. Now, I don't really have anything against Bad Company, but I don't really have anything for Bad Company either. It's one of those bands I've just never paid any attention to. Um, yeah, I do remember being just a tad bit crestfallen when I realized that it wasn't just some cool name they had summoned out of the ether, that it was the name from a 70s rock album with a strange Art Deco cover or something. So yeah, there is that, but it is a cool name nevertheless. Uh, Desolation Angels only made this one album. This is the Buried by Time and Dust reissue that was done, maybe a decade or so ago. Um, the album originally came out in 1986, and as such, a lot of people don't really consider it new wave of British heavy metal per se, because 86 is a very late date for that style of music. This is where you get into just kind of weird, contentious semantics issues. Personally, I've always been okay extending new wave of British heavy metal until the end of 1986. There were several very bona fide new wave of British heavy metal bands that released something very solid in 1986. Yes, I know it's very late and the movement had lost all momentum at that point, but it feels like it kind of struggled on at least to that point. Anything beyond that, sure, I think it's fair to say that the bar is closed. But a lot of folks would close it much, much earlier than that. Some folks think, the movement had, pretty much done its thing by the end of 82 or certainly by the end of 84. So yeah, some folks don't want to really lump Desolation Angels into the new wave of British heavy metal. But this is where you also have to pay attention to things beyond just the release date of the albums. Yeah, the album got released in 86, but the band had been on the scene since about 1981. In 1981, no one's going to dispute that as a new wave of British heavy metal year. Right? The band had also released a single in 1984. It's this one pairs the tracks Boadicea with Valhalla. We'll play some clips here in a minute once I get through this little opening diatribe about the band. They also had the full album basically recorded and ready to go around 1984. It was scheduled to be released on the Bullet label, which did several other good releases, in that time frame. But 1984 is when Bullet ran into significant financial problems, and a lot of the things they had lined up ready to release never got released. So Desolation Angels was not the only band who kind of, got screwed when that label went under and couldn't afford to release anything else in 84. So it took them a while to regroup and get the album back out. And so it actually didn't come out until almost 2 years later in 86. So when you say this is too late to be new wave of British heavy metal, well, actually, you're saying 1984 is too late to be new wave of British heavy metal, not 86. And again, a lot more people are okay with that 84 date compared to 86. You're also then saying that, a band that has stuck to their sound more or less since 1981 with, demos and then a single in 84, that somehow this doesn't count either. So yeah, I've always, it kind of rubs me the wrong way when people want to be very exclusive about, a certain cutoff date. Yes, I know the glory days, burned out pretty fast, but there were still good bands from that scene putting out good albums later on. Other people might take the tact of saying, well, this doesn't sound like a new wave of British heavy metal album. This goes back to another semantics problem. Is new wave of British heavy metal a scene, or is it a particular musical genre? And the answer is it can kind of be both. It definitely refers to a particular, time and place, young bands coming up in the early 80s in the UK. But there are also a lot of those bands that had a pretty similar sound. I typically refer to it as the Saxon sound, going for that style of new wave of British heavy metal. And yeah, Desolation Angels does not sound anything like Saxon. They've got a much kind of heavier, doomy sound, at least early on. And that's where we've got to look at some other things and probably just move on to getting some sound clips played. So let's start off again. The band had demoed some stuff as early as 81, but the single comes out in 84. So let's start there and we'll check out a clip of the track Valhalla. As usual with these clips, if there's a longer intro, I'll skip past that so you get an idea of what the song actually sounds like. But here's what Desolation Angels sounded like on their 84 single. All right, so there you get a good sense of what Desolation Angels sounded like. I really like Dave Wall's vocals. He can kind of wail. He's got a little bit of that eerie tone to his voice. The band's got, a much heavier vibe to them than a lot of new wave of British heavy metal. For my money, it always felt like Desolation Angels was maybe a little more influenced by stuff like Black Sabbath than, typical 70s hard rock, in the Thin Lizzy or UFO camp. They've got just a little bit more of that kind of haunting atmosphere, a little more weight to the riffage. And, for me, it works fantastic. I think it's a really good sound. Now, the song Valhalla would get redone on the debut album. The flip side, Bodicea, did not. It was the only place to get that, except for later compilations, was on the single. The single has never been a particularly high dollar item. I'll bet if you poked around even just a little bit on eBay or Discogs, you could get a copy of this probably in the $30, maybe $40 range at worst. So, and I bet it would be closer to the $30 mark. So yeah, it's one of those just kind of mid-priced items. It's been like the same price for 20 or 30 years. It's never really trended up or down. But yeah, very solid single. Shows what the band was up to. All right. So then, as I mentioned, the album was supposed to get released in 84, but the label kind of, went under, and the band was left without a place to put it out. So it came out in 1986 on a small imprint called Thameside Records. So Thames, like the river in London. Um, I don't know if this was a label or if this was just sort of an imprint the band came up with on their own. I've heard both. I'm not sure which is correct. But regardless, they did get it out. And for kind of a small or independent type release, I thought it always, looked incredibly good in terms of packaging. Very striking cover with the, Reaper on the big winged horse. Um, the back cover art is actually kind of cool too. No, it's not going to win prizes for, modern art competitions, But yeah, just the very striking image, with the big, lightning bolt through the skull on the cross, the band, depicted down here in the monk's robes, kind of again adding to that air of doominess to it. One of the band members there, if you look in the background, is depicted more as like a skeleton. I believe at the time they were without a full-time drummer, and so there you go. Somebody played drums, we'll just draw him in as a skeleton. Kind of a clever way to work around that. So the album comes out in 86. Obviously, it didn't get much fanfare, but it's a fantastic record, at least in my opinion. I became aware of this one in the around 94, 95 when I started doing mail order to get new wave of British heavy metal things from vinyl dealers. And somebody had a copy of this for sale, and they had written like this entire paragraph hyping this album up, and it sounded fantastic, but it was more expensive than I could afford at the time. I think eventually the same dealer got a second copy a little later, and my parents ended up giving me money to order records with for Christmas that year. And basically, I used the Christmas money budget, kind of blew it all to get this, and it was a blind buy. I'd never heard a note by the band, just this crazy hyped up write up. Not a great way to spend a lot of money on a record. It worked out okay. I'm going to play a couple of songs from this album. I think the album is fantastic, almost start to finish. I've picked out a couple of songs. Again, Valhalla that I played from the single, different versions included on the album. But let's check out another one from the album. This is a clip of a song called Dance of the Demons by Desolation Angels. All right, so yeah, a really nice, heavy, very doomy kind of flavored number there, Dance of the Demons. The band just does that kind of material exceptionally well here. And again, that's where I feel like there's, this kind of, strong Black Sabbath influence. I can almost feel like, early 70s Ozzy Osbourne singing some of these same kinds of songs. Not that he would ever have sung with Desolation Angels, but I think the material would have fit his voice or vice versa. Yeah, fantastic track, very emblematic of a lot of the stuff on the album. Let's play one more clip from the album. This song's a little faster, a little more aggressive, but still has that kind of, very dark atmosphere to it. This will be a clip from the song Angry Rain. I'm not sure how Rain is angry, but it kind of works in this context. right, so yeah, there's a bit of Angry Rain. Again, a little faster, more forceful, but again, just has that, same overall sort of oppressive atmosphere to it. The album is very, very good. If you've never heard it, I consider it, one of the stronger new wave of British heavy metal albums, even though, again, as we've discussed, it came out relatively late in the game. If there's an issue with the album, the production, yeah, is not great. Mid 80s UK metal albums rarely had much going for them in terms of production. If you weren't Iron Maiden or Def Leppard, your production probably kind of stank a little bit. You deal with it and move on, or you don't, I guess. Um, one or two last things to note about this debut album. Somehow or other, the album ended up getting a release in Brazil in 1987 on the Rock Brigade label associated with the metal fanzine. This has always confounded me. How in the world was there enough interest in Desolation Angels in Brazil to have this issued on vinyl in 1987? That just kind of blows my mind. Uh, a copy or enough copies had made it into the Brazilian scene and made apparently enough of an impression that they felt it necessary to put it out there. I don't know for sure if it was a legit release, if the Rock Brigade just kind of threw it out there, figuring nobody would ever really notice or care. But yeah, it's really interesting. It's the only sort of, smaller independent new wave of British heavy metal album I can think of off the top of my head that got a South American release. Again, if you weren't Iron Maiden or Def Leppard or something, those albums didn't get heavily licensed in other territories, really. But yes, you can get copies of this album on Rock Brigade. I've owned a couple of the theme side pressings. I've never owned one of the Rock Brigade ones. I think they're roughly equally rare. I don't know as one is more rare than the other. And the album is another one that, like the single, it's always been one of those mid-priced items. So, around the $50 mark should get you a copy of the original album without much trouble. It can be a bit difficult to find copies that are like near mint. Usually the covers, are going to have a little wear and tear to them. But yeah, the album's been $50 since the mid 90s. It's never really goes up much. Every now and then you'll see somebody pay like 75, 80 for a copy. But if you're patient, you can get a copy for, yeah, more like, 50 plus or minus just, $5 or $10. So don't overpay for the album if you want it. And again, it has been reissued by Buried by Time and Dust. One thing I will point out, I've only got the CD version of the reissue. They have the lyrics in here, a couple of band photos, but there's really no liner notes about the band's history, which is kind of a letdown. Buried by Time and Dust usually does a really, really nice job on packaging their stuff and having lots of extra, background history, liner notes, et cetera, et cetera. This one, it's, here's some pictures and the lyrics and we're done. So not really sure why they skimped on the packaging with this. Maybe the LP version came with more stuff and it's only the CD. They got kind of the bare bones treatment. Yeah, I just got this very cheap to have, a copy that's a little easier to play. Sometimes people wonder, like, why do you need the CD and the vinyl record? Well, if I've got the time and I want to sit down, relax, and play it, I'll put the album on. But in a lot of cases, if I'm more, on the go, working up in the attic or at work, stuff like that, it's a lot easier to grab the CD to play. This is also a lot easier to, transfer it and put it onto, my iPod. Yes, I still use an iPod and stuff like that than having to rip from vinyl. I can do that. It's a real pain in the butt and takes a long time. Anyway, so again, if you get the Buried by Time and Dust CD, don't expect anything extra in the booklet. So, what happens to Desolation Angels next? This is the point typically where the band fades into obscurity. We never hear from them again. Maybe they do a comeback album and we wrap this up. Desolation Angels has a second kind of chapter to their history, one that doesn't seem to be extremely well documented. Sometime after releasing the album in the UK, the band still demoed some more material. There's, if you poke around like on Discogs and stuff, you'll see a demo listed from 1987. And the band eventually ended up relocating to Los Angeles. So, quite the change there from the UK to LA. And they tried to make a go of it in the late 80s Los Angeles music scene. You know where this story is going to end, but how they got there, again, there's a little bit of oddity to it. They did end up recording at least, an album's worth of material in LA, and it's been released but a couple of different ways. And I'm not really clear on the history here. I haven't really seen a very thorough breakdown of it posted online anywhere. And even the New Wave of British Heavy Metal Encyclopedia, which tends to be a really excellent source for information like this, it completely makes zero mention of this phase of the band's history. I'm not sure if they decided it just wasn't interesting enough to include since they had left the country, or if they were just unaware that it even happened. But yeah, they ended up recording an album's worth of stuff around the turn of the decade that was called When the Flame Still Burns. And again, this is out on a couple of versions. It looks like it was originally a cassette only release. This is a picture just pulled up online of it. I've seen a couple of different color schemes. This copy obviously has a yellow and black scheme. I've also seen it with more of like a silver and black color scheme. Things to notice right away, the band's logo is gone, and this uh, art is really, really just kind of not doing much of anything. If this is the best you can come up with, you might just be better putting your big logo on the cover of the tape. But wait, it gets a little stranger because you'll also see it with this artwork, where it's like a big kind of metallic silver surfer looking angel with a British flag background, and here, there is more of a logo to it. Um, and this version of the art was used when this got reissued just here in the 2020s. But this version of the art also existed on cassette copies back in the day at some point. I know because I've seen them. When I lived in Texas, somebody, when they sold their collection, had several Desolation Angel cassettes from this period. I bought some. I didn't buy all of them because you could kind of tell by looking that this isn't going to sound like the album. And, the ones I bought, yeah, they definitely didn't sound like the album anymore. Um, what had happened? Well, let's see what it did sound like. We'll play a clip from this, a song called Only Time Will Tell, and see what Desolation Angels was sounding like around 1990 while stationed in Los Angeles. All right, so pros, the song is sort of upbeat, kind of forceful. Doesn't sound like they went, totally hair glam metal or anything like that. Cons, there's none of the atmosphere from the debut album present whatsoever. And Dave Wall just sounds kind of flat compared to the way he sounded on their first recording. That chorus just comes across as very flat, very bland to me. It's not the worst thing you're ever going to hear, but it certainly doesn't inspire me to want to, go out and track this stuff down. I'm kind of amazed that it got a reissue because, for my money, the material on this just isn't that strong. It certainly isn't in the same vein as what they had done while they were located in the UK. But wait, it gets weirder because at some point while in LA, they also ended up parting ways with vocalist Dave Wall and had a different vocalist named Lee Addison. And there's a version of While the Flame Still Burns that has Lee Addison singing on it. How this fits into the whole timeline, I'm not completely sure. As I said, there's not a lot written about this phase. Maybe the reissue has liner notes that explain some of it. I don't really want to buy this for the liner notes, but maybe if I find it cheap one day, I will. So I'm not sure if they did the Lee Addison version first and it didn't work out and they had to get Dave back in the band and redid it with him. I think it's more likely they recorded it with Dave Wall and then he left and they redid it with Lee Addison. But yeah, so it's the same basic set of songs, same title, but let's check out a clip of the Lee Addison version. This will be the same song, Only Time Will Tell, but with the, I want to call him the second vocalist for the material. Here we go. All right, so there's the other version. Can't say I'm a big fan of Addison's vocals there. Definitely sounds like an American singer. Definitely sounds like, maybe trying to get a little bit more of that LA sleaze vibe going in the vocals. And I think this version is why some people have occasionally referred to this era of Desolation Angels as their LA, like, glam phase. When you just hear the Dave Wall version of the material, you're like, that's not really glam metal at all. What are you talking about? That description seems very inaccurate. If you're hearing the Lee Addison version, again, the music still doesn't really feel like glam, but with those particular vocals, you start to see where they're going. Addison reminds me a little bit of, I think it's Vic Wright, who sang on some of those later 80s Tokyo Blade albums, like No Remorse, where, yeah, the band is definitely trying to go for a little bit of a different vibe. So, yeah. But wait, there's more. Again, Desolation Angels released some other tapes and stuff around this time, but it seems a bit muddled as to what counts as what. For example, I had a cassette tape called English Bastards by Desolation Angels, recorded around 90 or 91. I think it had only like 3 songs, maybe it had 5. I got rid of it a long time ago. Wasn't very strong material whatsoever. If you look, again, if you're looking at Metal Archives and Discogs, you'll see a release referred to as English Bastards. It's labeled as an EP. This tape never looked like an EP whatsoever. This looked like very much just a demo tape. And if you look at some of the notes on the 1987 demo tape that's listed online, one of the sort of footnotes is that this release is actually supposed to be called English Bastards. It's like, is the 87 tape and the later English Bastards, is it the same material? Is it the same songs but re-recorded? Was it meant as a demo? Was it meant as an EP? I don't know. Only time will tell. Oh God, I'm quoting that horrible song here somehow. That wasn't supposed to happen. So yeah, there's a little bit of, murkiness about what happens with Desolation Angel recordings around this time. Bottom line, TLDR, the band did not get over in LA whatsoever. It didn't matter whether Dave Wall was singing that material or Lee Addison. The material's not that great, in my opinion, and it certainly wasn't good enough or on the right trend to make a splash on West Coast American music in 1990. This is a year before grunge hits. You're not glammy enough to hang out with Motley Crue and Poison in 90 and 91. You certainly didn't have the, grunge chops to, go in the Nirvana Soundgarden Pearl Jam direction. So yeah, the band just didn't really go anywhere. So somewhere there in the early 90s, I believe the guys returned to the UK and the project was laid to rest. At least it was until about 2014. 2014 saw a revitalized Desolation Angels. Really tripping over that name tonight. The band releases an EP in 2014. It's got a pretty lame title. It's called The Sweeter the Meat. Yeah, I'm just not gonna touch that, Sweeter the Meat. If that's what you're titling your EP, I don't want to hear it. And I never have. So yeah, completely ignored it. The band has also, though, done a couple of albums in recent years. They did one called King in 2017. Came and went. I don't think I ever even heard about it at the time. And then in 2022, they released their most recent one, which is titled Burning Black. And I would have completely missed this one too, if not for sort of longtime viewer, online buddy Frank, who pointed this one out to me in 2022 when it was released. At the point of Burning Black, the band only has one original member, guitarist Keith Sharp. In terms of putting a lineup together, though, he was pretty clever and, got some older, scene guys involved. It's not just new musicians. For example, Burning Black features Paul Taylor on vocals. Paul's the longtime vocalist from Elixir, another good new wave of British heavy metal band whose album got delayed until 1986. Son of Odin and Desolation Angels are the two big reasons I think you still got to count 86 as a new wave of British heavy metal year. So, and the Burning Black album wasn't half bad. I'll play one clip from that one just so you can get a sense of what the band sounds like in their current incarnation. This will be a clip from the song Eye of the Assassin from 2022's version of Desolation Angels. There you go. So yeah, not a bad track. The album has a few really strong numbers on it. It does have a few clunkers, in my opinion, too. There's one or two. It's just like, oh, you felt the need to record that, did you? Interesting. But yeah, overall, it is not a bad release. At this point, if you've watched many of my videos, I don't often pay a lot of attention to these bands when they get back together. Maybe I'm just a lousy fan. I just find most of them have a very hard time capturing anything that even comes close to their, older original sound. You're just not going to have the same fire, fury, and passion for it when you're, 62 compared to when you were 18 or 20. You're not going to get that same vibe. But yeah, Keith Sharp, Paul Taylor and company, they put out a decent album in 2022. I'll absolutely give credit where credit is due, and a thank you to Frank for pointing this one out to me. Because yeah, it's not the kind of thing I would have ever, gone and checked out on my own. If he hadn't kind of, put it in front of me, he's just like, Alan, listen to this. Frank knows his new wave of British heavy metal. If he says something ought to be listened to, I'm going to give it a chance. So yeah, that's where Desolation Angels stands now. Last thing to point out about the band before I wrap this up. There was kind of like a compilation box set thing put out in 2008. What is it called? It was on Cyclone Empire, which I thought was sort of a strange label to release such a thing, but that's where it came out. It's called Feels Like Thunder. Um, when this was announced at the time, there were a lot of folks that were pretty excited, like, oh wow, that will be great. They're reissuing maybe like the early demos and the album and the single. They can get it all in one package. Awesome. And then when it was, kind of unveiled and the track list was shown, a lot of people were just like, what the fuck? Um, the box set, if you want to check out the band and you see this item, you need to look at it very carefully before you order it because it doesn't necessarily include the classic material that people wanted it to. Yeah, for example, kind of scrolling through it on Metal Archives here. Disc one has the While the Flame Still Burns material. Is it the Dave Wall version or the Lee Addison version? I don't know because I didn't buy it. Um, at the end of that, it's got a bunch of songs that look like they are from the 1987 demo, which may or may not also be the English Bastards demo. If it is also the English Bastards demo, the material's not very good. And then it has at the end of it um, one song that appears to be from the LP and the Bodicea B-side from the single. So it's just a real mishmash on disc one. Uh, disc two, again, it's just sort of weird. It starts with, Fury, which is one of the songs from the uh, years with the While the Flame Still Burns material. You've got Dance of the Demons, which of course is from the album. I don't know how this was put together. Maybe these are some of these random demos spliced together. Then you get to like disc three and disc four, and there's like a lot of live bites. I don't know what the sound quality is like on those. But again, it looks like a lot of the songs are more from the vintage era, around the early mid 80s. Some of the song titles are ones that, maybe some of these songs they had early versions of in their live set, and they just didn't use them until the Flame Burns On time frame. So I'm not sure. I've never been able to make heads or tails of how this box set was put together. And so as such, I would just, I'm not saying don't buy it. I'm just saying look at the track list very carefully. If you're just wanting this, the box set is not the thing to buy. I don't know why they didn't. The box set would have been real easy to put together. Disc one, do the album plus the single. Disc two, do While the Flame Still Burns and some of the demo stuff. Disc three, do the other version of While the Flame Still Burns, the Dave Wall version, and some of the other demo stuff. Disc four, you can do, the live stuff. It would have made a heck of a lot more sense. I'm not sure if they had trouble getting licensing agreements for some of the material. If the band didn't have the rights to certain recordings to put in the box set, I just don't know. It's a very confusing product. I don't own it, and I don't really have any desire to own it because it just doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't seem to have the material that I want in it. But hey, maybe I'm missing out and it's fantastic. You can tell me because now it's time for me to shut up and let's talk metal in the comments down below. Desolation Angels, anyone that's got some details, bona fide facts that can help sift through a few of these unresolved issues would be greatly appreciated. Making sense of some of the post original LP recordings, how those things fit together, when Dave Wall exactly was in the band, when he left, when Lee Addison came in, when he left, and yeah, any information about the box set. Somebody bought it. One of you knows what it sounds like. Maybe it sounds fantastic. Maybe all the live stuff is really great. If so, by all means, please correct me. Put a comment down below and let folks know that no, this is a really good set of recordings. If so, hey, maybe I'll finally go and check it out myself. But yeah, so once you finish watching this, check the comments below. People can share their knowledge there, and we can all find out a little bit more about this band. Yeah, if nothing else, they left us, with a good single and a fantastic album from back in the day. And, they've left us with a little bit of, sort of a mysterious follow-up period to pick apart. And hey, they're not doing bad material right now either. If you're interested in following up on some of these bands that have come back out of the shadows in recent years, that most recent Desolation Angels album is not a bad one to check out. Got to skip one or two tracks, but for the most part, it's a very solid album. All right, that will do it for this video. Until next time, everybody take care. And as always, keep banging your head.